So hi, my name is Gabriel Bernard, and for today's presentation, it's going to be about the midterm project in Information Technology 2. I'm going to compare an accountant's job with the theory we saw in class for Word and Excel. So I'm going to start off by telling you how an accountant uses Excel and Word in his daily tasks, and how memo and a survey can be used with Word using Module 8, 10, and 11, and how an accountant can use the pivot table, pivot chart, and a slicer, also using coding, insert controls, and macros in Excel for Module 8 and 11. I'm also going to talk to you about the similarities and differences between the reality and the theory when an accountant uses Excel and Word. I'm going to finish the presentation by showing you my webpage I created for the project. I'm going to start off by showing you the memo here. So the memo is something an accountant could use if he wants to make sure his employees are all aware of important information. So he could want to show the revenues of each department for the quarter and compare with other quarters. And since it's important documentation and important data, you might want to be checked out by one of his peers. So here he could use the function comments right here on the right, and the function track changes that we see in the text. So all the red in the text are all changes that were made by someone else. So it's really useful when to be verified and to make sure that there's no errors and grammar mistakes in the text you're sending to your employees, let's say, or your colleagues, or maybe even a client. So for the continuing with Word, here I also created a survey using Word. I'm going to show you from a client's point of view what could be done. So here, let's say I open the survey. So here we can see that the first name, last name, email, and profession are all plain text content control here, and that there's also drop down list for the have you ever used my services, and for the type of services desired, and for the preferred time of day for your appointment. I decided to use a combo box, so which allows the client to select either one of the options I put for him, or to enter one of his own preferred time. So I will now complete the survey to demonstrate the client's point of view when filling out the survey. So here I made sure that we cannot erase anything, so you can only enter what is demanded. So here, first name. It's actually really simple for the client to enter all the required information, and it makes it really simple for both parties. I'm a dentist, and let's say I have never used his services, and I desire to have taxation services, and I select an option which is weekend mornings. And then I would just email the form to the address here above, gabriel@accountingservices.com. So I find it's really useful to get more feedback and information about what your clients desire and what are the current trends in the market. Now moving on to Excel, I found that Excel Module 8 was really useful. So the pivot table, pivot charts, and slicers. So here's my original data. So I have type of service revenue, region, type of business, and then revenue for 2016 and 2017. I then created a pivot table and pivot chart using the sum of revenue for 2016 and 2017. So I can actually decide what I do with this data. So in this case, I decided to do a sum, like I said, but here in the other case, I decided to do an average of the data I had. Furthermore, we can also put filters. So here I decided to filter the data by region. So here we can see that it's all the region is selected, but I could select only city. So now we see that the data, pivot table and pivot chart automatically change. Now I could put it back to all to have all of the regions in my table and chart. So now moving on to average revenue. So here I decided not to add in the table. I decided not to add the type of business. But what I decided to do is to add a slicer and add the type of business in the slicer. So I could choose to only have the information about partnership, but I can also add cooperative and public corporation in my table and chart. But I could also just click X and then I have all my other information back. So for the final Excel, I decided to use the module 11 since I found it's another very useful way to have feedback. So it's another type of survey, but now it's using Excel. So here the client's information is created with a code. So here we can view the code. So when we click here, we see the code I typed in to create my client's information and to create the necessary things for the step 1 and step 3 button. So now so here we can see that the contact information and how they heard of the business. So here and here, so those are all options button. And for the type of services the most interested in, I decided to go with checkboxes checkbox button, so they can check more than one option if they want. For the step 2 button, I decided to go with a label button. And for step 1 and step 3, I decided to go with a command button. So now let's say I do the survey as a real client, so I would click step 1 and then I would enter all of the information required. So street address, city, let's say I live in Quebec, state, I live in Missouri, zip code, telephone number, email address. So here all the information I entered automatically pops up in these cells. And then let's say I follow the steps. So step 2, use options button and check boxes to select answers to questions. So here I decided to go with email for the contact, and then I checked social media for how I heard about the accounting business. And I decided to check the boxes at auditing and taxation for the service I was most interested in. And now if I was a real client, I would click on step 3, with which would submit the information I just entered. So I found this is really useful, once again, to get feedback of your company and what the clients want and what are their availability and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Now for the similarities and differences, I found that there was a lot more of similarities. So the similarities are that an accountant could really use memos in his day-to-day tasks to write memos to his colleagues, employees, or to clients. He could also use surveys using Excel and Word to get feedback on the job he's doing and maybe the job he's going to do in the future. Also, Excel is really useful to analyze data. So using the pivot chart, pivot tables, and the slicer, they're really useful tools for day-to-day tasks of all accountants. The differences I found for Excel and Word is firstly that a 3D map in Excel is not really useful for an accountant. Also, Module 9 in Word. I do not find this really interesting for an accountant. So creating a reference document with a table of contents and an index. I mean, it could be used, but I assume not frequently. But I assume it's not frequently used by accountants for what they have to accomplish in their job. So now I'm going to move on with showing you the website I created. So here is the website I created for the project. So here we can see accountant midterm project. So the website gives a little bit of information on the web page and on the video. So it's general information on the project. There's also more details in the video section right here. And there's also the link to the video you're currently watching. I also inserted a works cited section and a contact information section. So in conclusion, in this video, we looked at how accountants use Word and Excel and the differences and the similarities between the reality and the theory. And what I use to demonstrate my point in today's presentation are memo with comments, track changes, and content controls in Word using Module 8, 10, and 11. Also, I demonstrated how pivot table, pivot chart, slicer, coding, and insert buttons can be useful for accountants in Excel using Module 8 and 11. And also, I created a website with Wix. And my informational video you're currently watching was created with PowerPoint and was recorded with my screen recorder. So this is my works cited, which is also on my webpage. And thank you for listening, and I hope you learned a little bit more about how Excel and Word can be useful for an accountant and what are the similarities and differences of day-to-day tasks of an accountant with the theory we saw in class.